Okay, Jay Clark here for Renthal. We're going to give you some tips on installing new Renthal brake pads on your current dirt bike. Remove the cap off the master cylinder. This allows fluid and air to escape so that when we pry the brake pads apart, we don't have any issues. So you can just back it off and crack it open. When you open it up, you can just let it sit there and that'll let air escape. In this case, we're actually going to bleed our brakes, so we're going to go ahead and pull it off all the way. We want to pry our brake pads apart, or in this case, we can just push against the master cylinder. I'm sorry, the rear caliper. We just push against the rear caliper. That pushes the drums all the way back, and we can take the guard off out of the way, and then we'll take our that'll allow us to be able to bleed the brakes properly, and then we'll take the brake pin out of the way, and our two brake pads will be able to come out. So we just pull the pin out, and then we pull our brake pads out. A lot of times they'll just fall out, but you can pull them both on out, and then we're going to put our new pads on with these insulators. So with our old pads, it's a good idea to remove the stock backing plate and insulators here, and you can just get something in there easily to pry them apart. Little screwdriver or pick. Pry those apart, move those off to the side. And it'll install right onto our new pad. And if your bike doesn't have these, then don't worry about it and just run them without. Stock Honda ones are small, make a lot of heat. It's nice to have the insulators if you have them. Okay, so now we're ready to reinstall the pads. Just make sure that its clip stays in its correct position, which this one it's in there, and so is our back spring plate is in place as well. Just slide the pads in. You have to hold. You'll feel it go into its home on both sides. Our brake pin can use just a hair bit of grease, and you put just a little bit of grease on the O-ring that seats on the other side, and just a little bit on the shaft, just like so. Just a hair bit of grease to help it go right on through the plates. With our 8mm, we just tighten up the brake pads. At this point, we're ready to bleed our brakes. I'm going to pump the brakes first, get back in here, and then I'm going to hold it down. And we have a cool tool here. It's the vacula, and this thing just sucks fluid right through. Okay, so at this point now I'm going to add some fluid back in. Usually 2 or 3 times through here we'll get everything out and fresh. I'm going to pump it up a little bit, and I hold it. And then we're going to bleed again. And if you don't have a cool tool like this, you can do this just with a regular hose on the end and just be doing a lot more. But he stops. We let up. And we'll do one more time through. Now if you're doing this conventionally, it would take a few more tries. We already got good feel here. In the case this bike isn't that old, fluid's not too bad. Go ahead. Now we're going to let the fluid go down to the proper level. There's a line inside the master cylinder here. Stop. And our level is just right. We're right at the line, right inside. And you can see our glass is completely full on there. So now we're ready to put our cover back on, and we're completed in bleeding the brake. Okay, so right now we've got both of our bolts tight. And this wrench is a 7mm wrench, which is not in everybody's common toolbox. You have to know that if you work on a Honda. And so we've got all this buttoned back up. We'll put our rubber cap back on our brake bleeder and put the guard back on our rear caliper. And at that point, we're all done here and we're ready to move to the front. So at this point, we're ready to install our front brake pads. So we need to remove the little nut that's got a flat blade on it. It's easy to strip this off. It's a little nut that sometimes gets stuck in there. It's a good idea to put grease on it when we put it back in. You can also apply heat to it to get it out. Now the brake pin here, you want to loosen that. Now just get that started loosed. And now you're going to have to take off the whole caliper. So it's 2 bolts that go into the fork lugs. And you're going to loosen these completely out. So at this point we're going to spread our brake pads apart Since we're not going to be using these pads again, we're not too worried about damaging them. So we're just going to pry each of the pistons apart, and this will get us plenty of room for our new pads. And since we've opened up the master cylinder at the top, we're allowing room for the fluid and air to come out. So we push that out. Okay, so now we remove the brake pin. And remove the stock pads. And we make sure that our spring clip stays in place, and then the back clip stays in place. If they both stay in place easily, you just put the pads right back in, just like so. So at this point, we're ready to put our brake pin back in. I like to put a little grease on the threads to keep it from seizing up, and just a tiny bit on the shaft, like so. And just tighten it up. And this is, you want to get it nice and snug. But it doesn't have to be crazy tight. Like this little T-wrench works just fine. Now we slide it right over the disc and install the new the bolts back on. So at this point, we're going to add some thread locker. We're going to go with some blue Loctite, which is medium strength. We're going to throw that on right there. We're going to tighten these down to our manufacturer's suggested specs, which is good and tight. And we can look that up. But you should look that up in your manual and make sure that you're good, so you get a good feel for where that should be at. So we get these nice and tight here, and then all that's left to do is install our little plate for the pin. And we're going to put a little grease on that so that we don't have it seizing up in there. We'll just put a little bit on here, like so. Tighten that up. And so now we're ready to bleed our brakes just as we did the rear on the front now. The front takes a little longer to bleed, but same thing. All right, so we've already pushed our master cylinder out, so now we're going to suck out the brake fluid out of here. Gives us a little head start on getting fresh fluid in. And then we add fresh fluid all the way to the top. Use a good quality fluid. And then pump up the brake, get our pistons back there, and hold it steady while your buddy Dave cracks it and puts our bleeder on there. Now if you don't have a fancy cool bleeder like this, you can just use a hose at the end and just go back and forth over and over. Old school, so to speak. This way we just keep adding fluid. Within just a few minutes we can get all the fluid out of here with our Vacula. Pretty cool tool. You can find them on Amazon. They're kind of expensive, but if you bleed lots of brakes, it's well worth it. Most of the factory teams all have something similar. Okay, stop. So we'll bleed the brakes. Can be good to, as you hold the brake lever in, to tap on here, lets bubbles up, hold it here. And of course, another trick the factory guys use is holding a zip tie in here overnight, lets all the air bubbles out. All right, so that's pretty much all there is to installing some Renthal brake pads. Pretty easy. You want to, if you can, change the fluid every time you change brake pads. And then also, you want to break them in a little bit right around the pits before you just go hop straight on the track. Let them seat in. Grab the front and rear while you're in the pits, let them seat in. If your disc is worn at all, it's going to kind of contour to that shape, so it's going to take a little bit to seat in. And that's all there is to it.